Okay, welcome everybody to the Wine or Wellness Virtual Summit. We are back again with a very special guest today. With me right now is Erin Kerry. She is an integrative nutrition health coach. She has an amazing podcast called Sparking Wholeness, which I've listened to a few of your episodes, I'm going to be honest, and they're very good. And I have to say, I love your voice because you do have a really nice voice for radio, and it's very soothing to listen to. I got to be honest with you.
That's huge. Thank you.
Well, it's true. I mean, some people have podcasts and I'm like, yeah, you make me have anxiety. So this is going to be an amazing testimony. And that's what I'm going to call it. It's a testimony because that's how God works. Erin was diagnosed with PTSD and depression at 15. You followed by bipolar disorder at 18. So the firsthand suffering, you understand, and you overcame all of this by healing your gut and doing some alternative health modalities, and that launched you into this epic career that you now have as a health coach to thousands, because your podcast get 70 to 100,000 downloads, so it's pretty amazing. So I am so glad you're here and finally get to see you and know you, because we talk on Facebook a lot. But Erin, I just want to hear your story and your testimony, but first tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do besides influence half the world.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just honored to be here. I have been watching so many of these summits when I get the chance to, or so many of these, I guess you call them episodes for the summit, and they've been fascinating and mind-blowing. And I think you're brilliant, Tracy, and that guys, just so you know, she was on one of my podcast episodes, and it's a really good one. I still have people talk about it all the time. And so I just think I'm just honored to be part of such a group. So
that was the one that got all the downloads, right?
It got a lot of downloads. Actually, it was one of the very first ones. Things kind of blew up in March, but yours was one of the earlier episodes that did. People will still contact me about it. It's all about MTHFR, so look that up. It's very, very interesting. But anyway, so I'm a mom to 3. I have a 16-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a newly turned 4-year-old. And my husband is a counselor and a pastor at a church. And I talk about health all the time. That's what I love. So, yeah.
Beautiful. We're so glad you're here. And you have quite a story to tell about your struggles and how you launched into this. So I'm going to let you start there. And then I have some questions for you as well. But, I would really just like you to start off with telling your testimony. Like, when did you start struggling with mental health issues and mental health concerns?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say one of the reasons I am so passionate about this, today is World Mental Health Day, and we do have an epidemic.
How fitting.
Yes, it is very fitting. We have an epidemic that is just out of control right now, I believe. And I don't know if many people are talking about ways to recover from mental illness. It's like, it's just there, go talk to somebody, go see somebody, but that's it. And so one of the reasons I want to share is because teen suicide has grown 56% in 10 years. We've seen since June, kids, I call them kids, adults between the ages of 18 and 24 reported feeling a lot of suicidal ideation, 25% of them since March. So that's huge. So anyway.
Didn't suicide increase like 4 times during COVID? It was pretty substantial.
That anxiety, depression. We are all stressed. And of course, as I'll talk about, mental health is just our mental health issues, they're natural responses to dysfunction in our internal and external environment. And that is true for my story. And I'll just start from the beginning. One of the things that I think I share about even from my infancy is that I was colicky. I had lots of ear infections. I ended up having asthma. You guys talked about allergy shots just earlier. I was constantly given.
And you're like, now I got to add that to the repertoire.
Yeah, right. On tons of antibiotics, turned into steroids, asthma medications, allergy medications, you name it. Like, I had a lot of stuff going on, which does result in some gut dysbiosis. I also had an insatiable desire for sugar. I remember at a church potluck, like I was 8 or something. I remember eating so much cherry pie that I was sick all night long because I just couldn't stop eating the sugar.
But Erin, you're talking about a very normal pathway. And I can't remember who it was that actually talked about that pathway. It was either Dr. Sherry Tenpenny or it might have been Sheila Day who's coming up, but it talked about this normal indoctrinated process. Go into the pediatrician, vaccination, come back, baby's colicky, medication, whatever, right? They give them acid reflux. Baby comes back, ear infection. They give antibiotics. Baby comes back. And they're really now saying that these are like markers of growth. Like when your baby has colic, that's a normal growth marker. And then when that first ear infection happens, well, little Jimmy finally got his first ear infection, right? It's like almost like they're like, oh, just totally normal. And we're normalizing disease. Now, back when you and I were kids, not so much, right? I mean, it was just, our parents took care of us the way they did, but now it's these normal markers. So I think you're talking to a lot of parents out there that used to think this is normal. And what I'm hearing from you is that's not normal.
No, and I thought, and I will say, and I can go into it a little bit later, but with my third born, I saw the exact same pattern repeating itself. And I thought, oh no, this is not going to be his trajectory. We are not doing this. And I think kids these days, now I was growing up in the 80s, we didn't have enriched folic acid added to all of our wheat at that point, I don't think, and that's a big concern of mine because of the MTHFR gene mutation. But yeah, like
or glyphosate or any of the other stuff.
Say, a lot of the things that kids now, our kids are up against, we didn't have back then. And so as much as this toxic overload hit me, how much more is it hitting kids going forward? But yeah, so for me, it was just kind of it was a perfect storm, I mean, I think genetically, we talk a lot about epigenetics, and I think I had some predispositions to not having B vitamins, not being able to absorb B vitamins and all of that. And then I faced a trauma. When I was 9, my grandpa died, actually, speaking of allergies, of anaphylactic shock in our front yard of our house when I was 9 years old. And just watching that and hearing them screaming and watching the, emergency vehicle come. And I mean, all of that was very haunting for me, but I shut down. And one of the things about trauma that I continue to learn about is it absolutely affects our genetic expression as well. And that is something that gets carried down in our DNA. And for me as a kid, I didn't know how to process it. So I suppressed it until a few years later. And I started struggling with suicidal ideation. And the thing too, that's important to know about,
were you then?
it was the summer before my 8th grade year. I watched a movie that triggered it. So this had been, from 4th grade to end of 7th grade. So this is 3 years. And then all of a sudden the flashbacks started and the memories hit. And I realized I didn't want to be here anymore. And I didn't necessarily want to kill myself. I didn't necessarily want to die. I just didn't want to be here. And that was confusing for me because I grew up in a faith-based home. And I was told that, pray. And I thought, well, I'm not praying hard enough because I know I have good things in my life. I know that I have things I should be grateful for, but I just feel so sad. I just feel like I was in such a dark place and I couldn't figure it out. Well, fast forward a little bit, I ended up going to see a counselor. I ended up getting put on Zoloft, was my first medication I was put on. And I need to address something else too that I think is interesting is right before all of that, some of my depression hit, I had been put on birth control for a heavy cycle, for a heavy flow, which again is a normal thing that we do, right, for women and young girls.
Another milestone. Congratulations.
Exactly. But the thing about that, and I have it written down somewhere. Here it is. Teens on birth control are diagnosed with depression at a 70% higher rate than those who aren't.
Wow.
That's a huge amount. And so for me, I do think because birth control depletes B vitamins, again, it messes with your gut. And I wasn't on it for very long. But I think it was enough to kind of flip that switch and turn more genes on or off or whatever it was doing, and then you add on the Zoloft and gosh, I mean, it helped at the time, but at the same time, I still struggled, and I still would go, and then I would crash and go and crash to where by the time I was in college, they said, well, let's put you on something else because now you're into this manic, hypomanic. Well, at the same time that I had my first manic episode, I was diagnosed with mononucleosis. So imagine that I'm diagnosed with mono, where you're supposed to be sleeping exhausted all the time. And yeah, I fell asleep in classes, but I could also stay up for 48 hours at a time because I was manic. And so there's so again, I say that mental health concerns, this was my body telling me that something was internally, externally wrong. Something was going on that my body was just screaming out and saying, fix me, like we talk about homeostasis, like let's find some balance here. My body was trying to regulate itself. But so I did what I could. I was a good girl, I took my meds. I slept when I could. You tell me to do something and I'm going to do it because I want to get better. But it was hard. There were a lot of hard side effects of those medications, and then feeling that shame of there's something broken about me. At the time I was called manic depressive. Like they don't even call that manic depressive anymore, like that's an outdated term. But yeah,
that's
there's
old
a lot
school.
of shame. Totally. Now we say bipolar. And even now bipolar is really, when people joke about bipolar, it's like, that's not really like the weather's bipolar. No, that's not how that works. Like a period of time where you're low and a period of time where you're up. It's not just like a quick switch. And if it is a quick switch, a lot of times for me, it had to do with the medications I was on and the side effects of the medication that made me have hallucinations or bouts of rage or really extreme moodiness because of whatever the side effect of the med was.
So let me ask you a question. When were you diagnosed officially?
With bipolar,
Yeah.
I was 18.
You were 18.
Fall of my freshman year of college. Yes.
Okay. And what contributed to that diagnosis? The flashbacks, the manicism, because you also had mono.
I had gotten, and I had some periods of risky behavior. Now,
what would risky behavior be?
Some sexual relationships that were not for a good child.
Okay.
Right? Like that's a big side of, and that's something to talk about when we talk about,
because there's addictions and manicisms in that. So it's like you seek out any type of sensory stimulation. It could be drinking, it could be drugs. And we talked about that in the roundtable where kids are put on Concerta now, right? But I mean, back then they didn't have that. So, and then you talk about side effects of the medication. What were some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I remember one I was put on, it made my whole side of my mouth go like paralyzed, like just kind of slack, like I was just talking like that. A lot of them, they made me gain weight. They made me not be able to tell when I was hungry or full. So I would just eat and couldn't fill up and never felt like I was satiated. Let's see, sleep disturbances here and there, like too much sleep, feeling completely drowsy all the time. And a big thing is that I was just numb. And so then I discovered alcohol and how wonderful alcohol could make me feel, because the meds kind of went like that. And so the alcohol just gave me that little bit of a boost and gave me kind of that manic feeling again. But alcohol and meds don't mix. There were a lot of blackout periods, again, just like it was, there are a lot of things that happen. Other symptoms of mania, I need to go back to that because I think that this is important. Racing thoughts, pressured speech. Like I'm a person, I talk fast. I always do. And I'm always all over the place. But it was to an extreme to where my parents were like, okay, can you slow down? And then even I said in counseling, well, I could get through college in a day. Grandiosity, that's another side effect. Religiosity, we talk about, I wrote an article on my website about Kanye, when he went through his whole big conversion thing. He has said he's bipolar. And a lot of times religiosity is a part of mania too, just that extreme religiosity, not talking about like just regular, like we have faith. This is just an extreme, like I'm going to save the world. I am Jesus. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing.
That sounds like him a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, there you go. And that was kind of, so I would have these bouts of all of that. And again, it was just a whole mix. And then my senior year of college, and I got through college okay, which is really funny. That was kind of normalizing for me for whatever reason. I loved studying. It gave me kind of that routine. And that's something I'll talk about, is that routine has been very beneficial. It's so beneficial for people who have any kind of mental health, for any health issues, right? Is having a routine. And that's important. But I ended up getting through college somehow, but I found myself pregnant towards the end. And that was kind of the catalyst where it was like, okay, I can't be on my meds now because that's a big risk.
Yeah.
And somehow my illness went into kind of a remission during my time of pregnancy. I was really stable and things were really good. And even while I was nursing, things were really, really stable. And so that was kind of a catalyst toward healing for me, toward getting my life together, toward going, okay, I need to start getting some things in order. Maybe I need to look at my food. Maybe I need to look at exercise and some of these other things. Maybe there's something else I could be doing to help get myself stable for my child,
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you make the connection that it was the gut? because
Uh-huh.
that's
Okay.
what you said healed you, right? And
This is
I
where,
mean,
yes. So this is over 6 years ago, and I had been stable for a while. I had been doing, like I said, I was a good girl, took my meds, had my routine, slept when I needed to sleep. And I played around with some nutrition things here and there, and exercise is really, really good for my brain. I discovered running about, gosh, 14 years ago. Really, I don't do it as much anymore. But at the time, like that was, oh, this makes me feel good. I like this. So I kept doing it. And so over a little over 6 years ago, I started taking some probiotics because I thought that it would help, they would help me lose weight. Right. So I thought, then I learned about
you're like,
candida.
forget the brain, but you know,
Right. I had
this
no,
could help me
I
get.
wasn't even thinking about what it would do for my brain. But as I started feeling better and with supplements and taking a multivitamin with methylfolate, like, oh my gosh, how much better did I feel when I was taking a multivitamin that I could absorb? That made a huge difference. So that about 8 months in, I was able to wean off the last of my medication. I had been weaning off gradually, just naturally with some of these other lifestyle tools that I was implementing, but I was able to wean off the last of it. And it'll be 6 years in December that I have been med free. And I was on meds for 18 years. That is a
Wow,
really long time.
congratulations.
That's a really hard thing to do. And I will say again, like when I share my story, I am not recommending that anybody go jump
Right.
off their meds. I'm not recommending anybody stop taking anything, or I'm not anti-med. I'm not like making a statement. I'm just saying, for me, this worked for me. There's no one size fits all, but this is what helped me. And yeah, so that was big. So I started digging into all of that. I started digging into foods that impact gut bacteria. I started digging into stress, the impact of stress on our gut microbiome, right? And like finding out about the gut brain connection. And our enteric nervous system has 100 to 500 million neurons. Like that is a huge, that's why it's called the second brain, because all of those neurons they're located in our gut. And we have the vagus nerve that goes back and forth, and it affects vagus nerve. Whatever I put into my gut is going to affect my brain. And my
Well,
brain,
now
my
they're cutting that. They're cutting the vagus nerve, which,
oh
you know,
God.
to help with satiety and weight control. That's their new approach. So again, you know, manipulating the body. So can you back up just a little bit and explain to us the enteric nervous system? Because I think, you know, I understand digestion. Everybody, you know, you eat food, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and then out the other end. I think that's all people really think it does. But the enteric nervous system is one of my favorite subjects, and it's fascinating. So I would like just take a second and, you know, we have lots of time, you know, explain to people what that is and how it impacts the brain.
Well, it's the second brain, right? And so anything, we have so many, and I can talk about this as far as toxins, right? Like we have so many things in our environment, whether it's environmental toxins or it's the food that we eat or what we drink, like alcohol. So many things that the pesticides on our food will break down the gut lining, and that gut lining, when it becomes permeated, we have toxins that leak out. We have endotoxins. I think. Is it lipopolysaccharide? Now my brain is I'm gonna get it all wrong, but inflammatory cytokines. We talk about that a lot in relation to COVID and the
Mhm.
cytokine storms. Well, a lot of times these mental health concerns, it's just inflammation run amok because our gut lining is breached. And the lining of our gut, the wall that's supposed to be protective and not let anything in or out, well, now we're letting things out and our body kind of goes on the attack. And so I think, so again, going back to that whole mental health issues and anxiety, depression, these are normal responses when your internal environment is threatened, when your external environment is threatened. There's nothing strange or shameful. There's no stigma there. This is just what your body does to protect itself.
And
And
I want to emphasize the point in what you said earlier, that this just like hit you. Like it wasn't like this gradual thing. And I think for some people, one day you're fine. And the next day you wake up in a whirlwind of anxiety and depression and you don't know what's happening. And I think for people that don't suffer from mental issues, they don't understand that. They're like, well, how did you not see it coming? Or, you know, I mean, you said it was triggered by
mhm.
something and all of a sudden your whole world turned upside down. So you had this
Little
trauma.
things, little things
Right.
adding up, and
Yeah.
so it's not, and some people, like, again, you don't even like, we eat the stuff that we eat or the food, like, talking about like even our fabric softeners, right? Like just these regular environmental things that we have that are neurotoxic might not be neurotoxic for you today, but tomorrow at some point, it's
Right.
all going to add up, you know, and it's all going to affect you. And even things like hormone changes, right? Like that's my big thing right now. I'm 39. And so I'm really
You're a
heading towards
kitten.
well, I'm hitting an age where I'm like, I don't want any hormone fluctuations to trigger anything else, right? When I've
Right.
got everything so stable. And so that's something I'm kind of staying on top of as well and digging into. And how can I, you know, keep my cycle on track? You know, that goes into a whole other topic, but all of these little things impact our brain. And, you know, I saw something somebody posted the other day. It was talking about anything that you put into your body affects your brain.
Mhm.
And that is something that we don't, and I think, and it goes the other way too, right? Like anything we put into our brain affects our body. So I say a
Yeah.
body in stress will not digest. So if you're constantly stressed,
Oh, I
you're
like that.
constantly in fight or flight. Yeah, that is, I will say that over and over again, because if we are constantly stressed, like I had so many stressors going on that put my brain in fight or flight and kept me from being able to make clear decisions and kind of took my prefrontal cortex offline, to where also my body wasn't doing, I wasn't absorbing the nutrients that I did get, I couldn't absorb them, you know, and my immune system was not working well because I had mono, and which turned into reactivated Epstein-Barr.
Yeah.
And it's kind of constantly activated, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's just like all of these little things, whether it's we're putting it in our gut or it's starting from here in our brain,
Yeah.
they affect each other.
Yeah. So I'm going to connect all that
Yes.
because Judy Mikovits actually talked about this.
Mm.
She got into a little bit of epigenetics, and she was saying, you know, basically what happens is we have these retroviruses, these exosomes that sit quietly in our body, and they don't really affect us, and we don't know they're there until there's an added stressor put upon our body, be it poor food choices, overgrowth of candida, toxicity from the environment, injected toxicity, inhaled toxicity,
Mhm.
visual toxicity, auditory, whatever that looks like. And our immune system then becomes preoccupied with whatever this toxicity is. Now, if it's emotional toxicity, like you're talking about, the brain's the chemist. He determines what gets dumped into the bloodstream, right? So if you see your husband, you're like, oh, I love him. That's oxytocin. If you see somebody that you know you're going to have a confrontation with, that's going to be adrenaline and cortisol. So what we visually hear, all that stuff matters and can actually have a physiological response. So, you know, to your point, it is very important that we keep the, you know, mental health and physical body health.
Mhm.
So as we have this epigenetic transfer of information, it will literally change how the genes code. And
Yes.
so your bloodstream then carries that all through your body. So it's not just affecting your brain where it's actually physically happening, but it's affecting your heart and your kidneys and your liver and your lungs. And so you're talking about, you know, the enteric nervous system being so powerful. It is because it's affected always. It's affected by every sense that you have, right? Touch, taste, hearing, smell, all of that. Temperature affects that nervous system. And it also is affected by nutrition. So while you can, you know, change what you eat, it's really important to change how you think about what you eat.
Yes.
And this whole demonization that we've done to the food industry,
Mhm.
that food is bad and calories are bad and, you know, carbs are bad. I mean, is there anything good left at all? Can I look at something and not already have a preconditioned idea of like, that's bad, I can't eat that? Like, we've really destroyed
Yep.
nutrition. And so I think we have to first get back to like, hey, food is good. Food is fuel as long as it's food, right? Tree, ground, run, swim, fly, which we're going to talk about next. And then,
Yep.
you know, we have to get spiritually well so that our soul is healed, so that our emotions don't run rampant and we remember who we are. So all of that enteric nervous system wrapped up, you know, physiological, all that, that's kind of how it connects. And all of that information then gets sent to your body, and then your body does things, whether you're destroying cells or you're creating them. So it does matter. So this is really fascinating. And I thank you for sharing your story. I know that, you know, it was quite a struggle. So there's a lot of people watching. and I'm sure they're watching for a specific reason. So how do you recommend people address mental health concerns? Like, I know you have a 4-step
Yeah.
process.
Well, I developed, I'm a teacher at heart, right? So I taught public school for 11 years. So I have an acronym to share that I think that kind of wraps all this up into a bow, because I think that we have to get practical. Like, we can talk, I love getting nerdy and learning all these things and talking about epigenetics and like everything that I read. I'm like, I want to share this with people, but also like, how do we practically
Hmm.
utilize this, right? And what you just said, I want to touch on that again because it's so important, is that if we are stressed about our food, it doesn't matter, right? Like,
Right.
if we're not
It's
gonna,
already
again,
bad for
feel
you.
suggested. Yeah. So we can't, and I spent so many years, and that's a big part of my story too, because of the weight gain side effects on my meds. I spent so many years with poor body image, going back and forth on diets, and I was always eating to get to that goal weight, right? And so food was
Mhm.
more of a tool to get to whatever weight I wanted to be. I wasn't using it as medicine. And so that's
That's
what
right.
I will get into with this little acronym that I've come up with. And so the
Okay.
acronym is LIVE, because that's what we want to do. We want to live, and we want to be free from these things that weigh us down, because the world is overwhelming, and we are all overwhelmed right now. No matter how we feel about what's going on, it's overwhelming, it's burdensome, and somebody needs to sound the alarm, and so I'm sounding the alarm. And so my acronym is LIVE. And so the L stands for learn to manage stress. I think that needs to come first. I think our primary nutrition is our relationships, spirituality, like our faith, just the environment that we live in and who we surround ourselves with and how we are managing our stressors is huge. And so people are like, learn to manage stress. What is that? We're all stressed. How do I can't not be stressed. And that's true. I am a high stress person. I'm stressed all the time, and I carry it in my body. And that's the thing we need to remember, is that our fat cells are inflammatory, right? Like,
Right.
and our stress will be stored in them. So anyway, that's a really important point. But yeah, stress is really killing us. And I do think that stress is behind so many of our
Mhm.
inflammatory disorders, because we are living, I mean, think about all of the notifications you get on your phone, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm not even on Twitter because I can't even imagine. Like,
That place is crazy on Twitter.
it's
I'm not going
crazy.
there.
It's crazy. And this is an election year. This is a year where it feels like
I know.
everything's falling apart, right?
I have no
So
desire to tweet.
yeah. It's stressful, and it's really affecting the way our body functions, because again, we get into that fight or flight mode, and it's shutting
Mhm.
down important processes that need to happen. So we have to learn to manage stress. So my big thing, I love talking about breathing, the 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, and let it out for 8 seconds. Nose breathing. We don't do that. We are mouth breathers. And I think now that we're wearing masks, we're mouth breathers more than ever
Yeah.
before. And it's just that short, shallow breathing that, again, is putting us into fight or flight. So take some deep breaths through your nose all day long, as much as you can. That is huge. Gratitude, and really taking captive those toxic thoughts, taking ownership of your thoughts, and being, in the moment and going, okay, I am feeling triggered. What is behind that? What is causing that? And that's something for me. I just move from thing to thing. And I think we have to get ahead of these things before we face those extreme mental health symptoms, because you couldn't have told me that when I was in the middle of a really, really dark place, right? But to have these tools ahead of time, to be grateful and to learn to step outside and go, okay, I'm feeling, my heart rate's picking up right now. I'm breathing a little heavy. My stomach is kind of tangled up in knots. What is my body telling me about what's going on? And listen,
Mhm.
our bodies are always telling us. Our bodies are screaming out to us usually when there is something going on in our brains. Being outside is really healing. Nature is anti-inflammatory. That's something we get vitamin D right now, depending on where you live. It might, it's getting colder. That's a little bit harder, but movement is a great way to manage stress. Just taking a walk. I mean, we sit so much. Supplements can help manage our stress load. I know you guys talked about that in one of your things like GABA. We were talking about that.
Mhm.
There's so many things that can help lower our stress load. supplements. And again, less time on screens is really big. But that's learning to manage stress. So
You're
that's
killing me today, Erin. I'm sitting all day long streaming in front of a screen.
where are your blue light blockers? I know, I need mine too. But
I just keep taking my 2020 by Nutritional Frontiers, which
there we
is
go.
going to help my pineal glands
Okay,
survive.
there we go. Yeah.
And in
Yeah,
honor of you, I've brought my GI Complete. So
nice.
I didn't want to feel guilty. So I was like, oh my gosh, what do I need? Erin's coming. You're like my conscience.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it is like these things, even though we just live in a world where we have all these awesome things that are available to us, but they do, again, talking about that toxic load, right?
Mm-hmm.
It all builds up. And so we need a break. We need to find ways to schedule breaks. I'm not good about that, but I try. I read fiction for therapy. I will take time out on the weekends and go, okay, I'm reading a book. Nobody bother me. It slows my breathing. It puts me in a calm state. That's the thing that works for me, and everybody's got to find what works for them. The I in LIVE stands for identifying root causes. And this, again, we look at mental health a diagnosis as the issue. We're not actually looking at it as a symptom of underlying issues. So I had a lot of stuff going on that contributed to my diagnosis. I had trauma. I had probably some candida overgrowth. I had probably some major burnout adrenal stuff going on. I think about even a lot of people, and I didn't necessarily have these, but food sensitivities, nutrient deficiencies, being deficient in B vitamins or vitamin D. I struggle to get vitamin D, and I take so much, and I'm in the sun, and I still am at the bottom level of optimal.
There's actually a mutation for that. I'll teach you about that.
VDR, right?
Yeah, that's right. There you go. People don't realize that.
I've got the homozygous.
You do. See, people don't realize that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so genetically, many of us are predisposed to things. And so if we aren't, looking at these root causes, and we're not going, okay, wait a minute, I'm predisposed to being low. And I think B6 was one of the things that popped up. Like, that's pretty important to know, and I've got the MTHFR gene mutation. And so I know my folic acid conversion to folate is not going to, and again, go listen to my episode about MTHFR with Tracy talking about it, because you explain it in a way that I've never heard before, in a really good way, that just breaks it down for people. But that's a huge underlying thing. That's a root issue. Food sensitivities, any other kind of leaky gut issues, thyroid, like how many people are struggling with thyroid issues, but their tests show normal.
Right.
I have to put it like that. They show normal. And so they're diagnosed with, oh, it's anxiety, it's depression. And so let's put you on a medication for that, and without ever testing. And I think it's, I'm a big fan of Dr. Daniel Amen. He does brain scans.
Yes, I love Dr. Amen.
He's the guy, he will say that psychiatry is the only area of medicine where we don't actually look at the organ we're treating. And so what kind of toxicity is going on? Were you dropped on your head as a baby? That could be impacting things. And then toxicity as far as what were you exposed to? Fumes, or did you live near a chemical plant, or did you, I don't know,
Well, can I stop for a second and talk about Dr. Amen? Because this is a different approach to neurology. Most of the time you'll have a CAT scan, MRI, they look at your brain. Dr. Amen does a SPECT scan. So what that does is it looks at dark, closed off blood supply to certain parts of the brain from trauma, deficiencies like you're talking about. I actually had a friend who actually went to his clinic and healed. So this particular friend, when I showed up at her house, I was doing personal training with her. She was on her roof, and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I can't take it anymore. She's like, I'm just going to jump off. And it wasn't like a small, she probably would have survived it, but I wasn't willing to take the chance. So I'm like, let's go back inside. So I got her inside and called her husband and all this kind of stuff. But at the time I was reading his book. So there's no coincidences. And God was like, here's a book and your friend is going to have an issue. So she went to his clinic. And it was covered by insurance a little bit, but her SPECT scan showed the one part of her brain that controlled all her ability to think logically was totally shut off, dead. She was on numerous medications. So when she got there, she had to stay with him for a week, and they did all these evaluations. And to see her SPECT scan from when she first went to her last visit was unbelievable. So it was like a 6-week treatment. She changed her diet first. I mean, she was like an avid Diet Coke drinker, like
Oh, no.
drank Diet Coke like no
Oh,
one's business.
worst.
Changed all her diet, all lots of nutrients to the brain, certain brain gym activities, just all this different stuff. And then he recommended chiropractic for some neurological stimulation, just all kinds of different things. Amazing. It reactivated that part of her brain. And he has so many stories. So if you haven't read his book or visited his site, go to draymanclinic.com. Great stuff on brain health. And you sound just like him with all the things you're talking about. And he's brilliant.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm always, all of these brain people I'm continuously inspired by to learn more about. Like, there are things I learn about myself all the time, like, oh, that was a trigger, and and that's, we have to advocate for ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it. I mean, and I will say, I had amazing doctors, and I've had amazing therapists and people that have helped partner with me, but unless I am explaining what is going on, when we're talking about mental health, nobody can see inside your brain and feel what you're feeling and see what you're seeing. And your nervous system, the way you perceive the world, is your own, and so you've got to do it for yourself. And if you are being told something and you're feeling, again, in your gut, that maybe that's not right, go see somebody else. We have so many different healers and therapists, like people available to help. So getting to the root causes. Another thing, inflammation from nutrition, again, that's huge. People, I was eating, I loved Taco Bell. I loved all the sugar. I was the biggest sugar, like I couldn't stop. Like donuts, I think in high school at one point I ate 8 of the Dunkin' Donuts Boston cream pie donuts, 8 of them in one set. I'm 8.
Wow.
I'm doing this like it's 8, but it's this. I don't know my numbers.
You're like, my other 3 were down here. I didn't eat those yet.
Yeah, right. No, I ate them all at one time. And part of that, again, like I said, I didn't know if I was hungry or full. Like when people say, listen to your hunger signals, what are those? I didn't have those. I just had this, and it could have been a dopamine thing. Like, again, there's so many things that I don't know if when you're in fight or flight, dopamine can be dysregulated. Like there are a lot of things there that I, can't explain into detail the mechanisms, but it's something to look into. So that's I, is identifying root causes. V in live is variety in your diet. This is my favorite topic, because like I said, I used to be a processed food addict, and I don't say, like I tried to eat like salads or whatever, but I associated salads and nutritional food with dieting and getting to the goal weight. I never thought about, like, I'm going to do this so I feel better. Like it was always about something else. And so 25 different veggies in a week is, I think, really optimal, what we should strive for gut microbiome diversity. I've read numerous things about that and how helpful that is. But even I tell a lot of people, just start with 5 different vegetables a day. How many people are not getting antioxidants, and their number one antioxidant is from coffee, right? Like so many people, that's our antioxidant.
That's bad. Darn.
Yeah, right.
Well, I had one today. I had one antioxidant.
But yeah, and playing the colors game, and like, how many different colors can I put on my plate, and always making extra. And I'm not perfect about this, but I'll tell you, I noticed such a difference on my mood when I am adding in these veggies, because my body is craving these nutrients. So that's huge. Now with with vegetables, you want to be aware of lectins, and there are people, if you have really bad leaky gut, there might be people that can't break down certain vegetables, and we have all this. So again, you learn to eat what you can digest best, and that's where it goes individualized. The other thing is quality protein. I stayed away from a lot of animal protein for a long time. 1, because I didn't like it that much. 2, because I thought it was high fat. I thought fat was bad for a long time, because that's what we were told.
Poor little fat. It got so demonized in the 80s.
Turns out, right. And turns out that's what our brains need to function. And so we also need protein, as I've been reading recently, to create our neurotransmitters. We can't make serotonin if we're not getting protein. And that also means digesting protein.
That's right.
That is huge. And that might involve enzymes that, we are, like you guys talked about the other day, we are blocking acid, and we are destroying our gut health, because we're like, oh, I have too much acid. And it's like, no. You probably don't have, you're not producing digestive enzymes. You don't have enough acid. These things are important. So being able to digest your food, digesting protein is huge to make your neurotransmitters. So that's a big one. Quality protein. I love, the biggest thing too for me is grass-fed beef. discovering that in the last few years has been a game changer. I am a big fan of grass-fed beef. Before that, I didn't like beef. It didn't make me feel great. But once I started the grass-fed, kind of like my brain was like, ding, like it's just a switch turned on. Same thing with fat, adding in the fat that I thought was bad for all of these years, that's what my body has needed. And it makes me feel so much better.
And do you think the grass-fed beef, the light bulb moment in your brain was due to the K2 in it? Or what made the difference for you?
Oh, I honestly, it's packed with B vitamins, right? And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of it for me is my body is so craving B vitamins and fatty
Mhm.
acids. And there's just so much that K2, that's a good thought. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, so K2, just so people don't know, you can only get it from, the animals that eat grass that
Yeah.
change
Mhm,
K1 to K2. And I always tell people, like, we're not a cow. We can't
mhm.
convert it like they can for us. So when we
Yeah.
eat the meat from grass fed, that K2 is one of the first processes of, like you're talking about, your neurotransmitter need. So it talks to your probiotics set the standard, and the standard is how much B, how much A, how much E. So your probiotics, I mean, I think people think everyone's going to poop well and they're part of the immune system, and that's true, but they also tell our body need, and then they meet with the enzymes and they
Yeah.
determine the breakdown of those nutrients. So I could go on forever with you with gut health, you know what I mean, because it just
Right.
is so important. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad you're talking about it as your pathway, because it's just
It's huge. Well, and the other
for
thing
you.
to think of is people like I used to eat, we have in Texas, we have Whataburger. So shout out to Whataburger. And it's a, just your typical fast food, whatever. We'd pick it up after church. And I noticed I would eat this huge Whataburger, huge thing of fries. I would be hungry an hour afterwards. Like that doesn't make any sense because I just ate all this food. But my body was asking me for nutrients. My
Mm.
body was asking me for food that it could absorb and use to do what it needs to do. And so I think that that's a big point with this whole adding in variety. People will be like, well, I'm just going to have egg whites and chicken breast and broccoli all week long. I've got it all portioned out. Okay, that's a good start. But if you're eating the same thing all week long, you're not giving your gut the diversity that it needs.
Mhm.
So that's important. And when we're talking about things like grass-fed butter has butyrate. Butyrate is a really important short chain fatty acid for mania, for bipolar disorder. Like there are things, especially if you are, more of a mood disorder type of person, you need that fat in a
Mhm.
big way. So that's huge. The whole sugar thing, like that's obvious. I think a lot of times our anxiety is actually really just blood sugar dysregulation. I think that we're constantly eating because we're not getting the nutrients we need. So we're going to get that quick, short glucose however we can because we're
Mhm.
not getting the good fats and the veggies and the protein. So that creates all this blood sugar dysregulation. And so I really do. I employ for myself more of an ancestral approach, seasonal, where I'm focusing on the food that I can absorb and use. And then the last part of the acronym is pretty obvious. E for live stands for exercise. Exercise your body and your brain, because when you're exercising your body, you're exercising your brain. There's so many cool things about brain drive, neurotrophic factor out there, and exercise. And what that does is it helps your brain cells renew and grow. And we need that as we age. It helps prevent cognitive decline. Like at this point, I've worked so hard on my brain. I'm not risking that cognitive decline, So exercise is good for that. And if you're super stressed out and fight or flight all the time, it might not be it might not be high intensity exercise, maybe strength training. There's some interesting studies I've seen pop up about quad strength and brain health, which is really interesting. I mean, I think everything is connected, but
Mhm.
just increasing the endorphins and helping with dopamine and helping with blood flow. Blood flow is so huge when we're talking about brain health. And that's something Dr. Ayman talks about as well. But when you exercise your body, you exercise your brain. And so I put those together because what we do for our body impacts our brain. And if we're sitting around all the time, we're not getting enough anything to our brain. So,
Mhm.
I mean, unless you're part of a really amazing virtual summit, and that's and that's okay.
Then that's okay. That's okay, Tracy. You're not
Yeah,
failing your brain.
yeah,
I'm over here taking 2020 probiotics, GI complete. I'm like,
right,
"I'll be
yeah,
okay." But
yeah,
again, I mean, I don't have this particular job all the time to, live stream a virtual summit, but some people do. Some people do have a very computer centered position, or, you know, a job where they sit all the time. And they do have to add those additional nutrients. And it's probably more important for those people than it is for people that have an outside job or are very active. So um, listen to all of this information. I love your acronym, you know, live, learn to manage stress, identify root causes, variety in your diet, and exercise your brain and body. So good. I love it. And you need to trademark that before someone takes it. But anyway.
So true.
So what are some of the tools you use in your daily life to promote mental stability for yourself, and some suggestions you can give to our audience?
One thing that's really important, and I've talked to my functional medicine practitioner about this, is that sometimes, you know, bipolar disorder is actually just a circadian rhythm disorder, and just our circadian rhythm is off. And as a female, I have the circadian rhythm. I also have all those hormone factors. And so I have noticed that for me, the way my mood, and this is for everybody, this isn't just me, watching my cycle, watching my menstrual cycle and watching each phase and how my mood changes, and being kind of on top of that and being able to make sure I'm providing my body what it needs during each phase, because we have been told to go, go, go all the time. Women, you can do everything that men do, so you just go for it. You work out when you're on your period and you da-da-da. But honestly, sometimes our body is telling us to slow down and take a break, and we need to listen. We need to listen to those cycles and embrace them too, and embrace the fact that our body's working hard for us all the time. And so embracing the hormonal flow and fluctuations that happen, instead of suppressing with taking a pill to shut it all off, or taking a shot to shut it all off or whatever. I think just leaning into that and going, okay, what does my body need today? What does my brain need today? What do my hormones need today? That luteal phase before, because this is a huge part of my mental health healing. So I'm talking about menstrual cycles. Sorry if you're a guy, but this is important.
It affects men too.
Yeah, it does, right? Maybe you need, if you have a spouse partner, you need to know.
Andropause is a real thing.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about circadian rhythms, just for people who are listening, circadian rhythms come from the hypothalamus. They are the pulse of our body. And it's not just your sleep cycle, which is a big part of it, but circadian rhythm sets the pulse of every homeostatic function in your body. So it's like regulates your heart rate and your blood pressure. And it's just kind of like that cellular pulse. So that's what you're talking about. Okay.
So sorry, and then I went off talking about, I think it's called the circadian rhythm, which is the female side of things, but those two things go together, you know? And so there are times of the month where I know I need to slow down. I need to eat more carbs. That's important. And women, we're told don't eat carbs, but there are certain times
carbs are bad, Erin. They're bad.
My body needs carbs. You know, there are certain times that they need more than others, so that it needs them more than others. But yeah, and then, so circadian rhythm, right? So something that's really beneficial for that is morning sun, because we want to activate our mitochondria, first of all, but we want to activate the pineal gland that you're talking about, because we can produce melatonin later on if we're getting that morning sun. But blue light blocks melatonin production. And so we need to make sure that after it gets dark, and maybe if you're being on a screen all day too, that would be helpful. But after it gets dark, to put on those blue light blockers, so your body can produce, so your body goes, oh, okay, it's time to rest. I mean, ideally you would want to be off of your devices for like 3 hours before bedtime, but in a real, we live in a real world, and that's just not going to happen for everybody. So so blue light blockers can be really helpful for that. Wearing a sleep mask is helpful for me, because it tells my body, like, there is no light, there is zero light coming through, and it tells my body this is sleep time, this is when we sleep. Because the thing with people with mood disorders, when you are manic, hypomanic, you think, oh, I don't need to sleep because I can get so much done. I can go organize my closet now, I could go write a whole book, or I could, whatever it is. That's when our brain turns on, is at night. And so we need to find ways to shut it down.
Amen. Well, Dr. Anup Kanodia, he's a Harvard graduate. He does a lot with sleep. It's like the basis of his entire practice. And he said exactly the same thing as you did. You wake up in the morning, you want to get outside in that morning sun, go stand in it, look at it, and stay out there for 3 to 5 minutes. It's going to shut down the melatonin. It's going to preserve it for later. It's going to help it, come back. But at nighttime, between 10 and midnight, is when you're going to have that second fluctuation of cortisol, what we call our second wind. And I got to tell you, Erin, if we don't have our kids in bed by 8:39 or upstairs, man, it's like It's like they slept for 10 hours and they're ready to go again. And that just shows you, I always tell people, if you don't think the brain is controlled by your environment and what you eat, I'm going to give you my kids for 5 hours and I'm going to sugar them up and then let them stay up till 10:30 and let me know how your night went, because it's unbelievable, but it's true. And we have to get better as a society to not demonize people, right? Yet again, that if you go to bed early, you're lazy or you're weak. When do all the good shows come on, Erin? And what time is the news coming on, right? 11 o'clock at night. Why do you think they do that? They're programming you with all this negativity and you go to sleep. You're not going to be rested. Plus, you're going to have this whole different facade about you in the morning. So really important to be paying attention to what she's saying about food, environment, all these things. This is just such a great talk. I can't wait to share this. So,
well, and a perfect example too, I got to throw this in there, because if our cortisol, our cortisol is supposed to lower at night, but like last night, my husband turned on the last few minutes of the Heat Lakers game, and all of a sudden that cortisol, whoop, it's a good game. What's going to happen? Oh, they're in the lead now, like this back and forth, and my brain couldn't shut off after that. So it's really important what are you watching before you go to sleep? Because a lot of times we are watching things that rev us up, or the news, which is like the worst thing to watch before you go to sleep, because then you're going to be staying awake trying to solve all the world's problems.
That's right.
That's a big thing for me. And last night I was like, why did I do that? Because I know my body and I know what I need to put into practice, but I'm still learning. So I could go on and on about other things. Faith is huge. We are a 3-part being: body, mind, and spirit. Faith is big for me, and having that mindset and having that gratitude and renewing my mind, connecting with other people and having relationships, friendships. That's so, so important. And people that you can be real with and vulnerable with and honest with.
So tell me, what do you think of the social distancing, Erin?
Oh, wow. Do you really want me to go there?
I'm sure there's a podcast we can turn into about it.
It's killing us. I think it's killing us.
I think it's killing. I think it's causing psychological warfare on our children, especially because they can't abstract think. They can't go beyond like, wait a minute, I can't see my friend today, So I would like to hear you address that on your podcast if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've said a few things. Anybody who knows me, I will go off. But
okay, I'll tune in.
Yeah. But face to face is so important, and being surrounded by people and community is so important. And that's, you look at blue zones, like one of the things I love reading about the blue zones, and these are the healthiest little pockets of the earth. The number one thing, and they all eat different things. They eat a lot of vegetables. They eat a lot of, whole nutrient dense foods. But one thing they all have in common that stands apart, makes them stand apart from any other is community. They all live in community. And when they eat, they might be drinking wine. They might be having dessert, but when they eat, they're together, and it's an event. And and I just think we need to go back to that, to living. We have separated our, another person I love reading is David Perlmutter, and his newest book, Brainwash, he talks about disconnection syndrome. And we are all suffering from disconnection syndrome now more than ever before, because we're living through a screen and we're interacting with people. I see people commenting things and I'm like, you would never say that to me in real life or to that other person in real life. But our brains have gone offline because we're in fight or flight. We get triggered. We can't activate our prefrontal cortex. Anyway, I'm going off into a totally different.
No, I love this. Tangent away. It's totally fine.
But it's
true though. It's true.
Connection. When we lose connection with other people, we lose the ability, and when we're stressed, we lose the ability to show empathy and to make good decisions and to encourage others the way that we need to live in a community, like that's anyway.
And you're not held accountable for what you say. You can get on Facebook and call somebody the worst name in the book and wish death upon them. And I always laugh, like I'll post something out and somebody will come on and be like, well, I hope your kids die and your whole family. And I'm like, would you say that to me if we were like standing here together? Like really? And I laugh because I'm like, honestly, people get so triggered and we've lost this, like you said, this connection of looking at you and saying, you're a real person with real feelings and you matter. And what I say is going to impact you because from the heart, the mouth speaks and our voice has power. And we have to be very careful what we're doing and teaching our kids to commune together. That's why I pulled my kids from school. I was not going to let them be part of this experiment where they're told that they're dirty, they're diseased, their friends are dirty and diseased, stay away from them, they'll make you sick. I will never, ever, never abide in that, ever. So we go to our co-ops and our community and we eat together and we play together and it's all together. And you know what? if somebody gets a flu because of it, they're going to be fine, because at 99.9% of the time we're going to recover.
Yeah.
So I agree with everything you're saying. I love this. And before we leave, I'd love for you to share how they download your podcast, because I think it's vital that they continue this knowledge and learning with you. Also, any way to connect with you if you seek clients. I'd love that information as well.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Sparking Wholeness, and that's wholeness, WHOLENESS. And it's sparking because I don't want to cure anybody. I don't attempt to. I don't diagnose, none of that. I just want to set a spark into motion so that you can be your own health advocate. And if I can partner with people one-on-one to do that in a group setting, I love it. I love talking about health and sharing what's worked for me. It might not work for you. We can find something else, like we can individualize things. And so Sparking Wholeness is my podcast. It's everywhere. It's iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all of the things. My website is sparkingwholeness.com. And that is where I regularly blog about whether it's my recovery, trauma, my story, or I post my podcast episodes on there. I throw up some recipes here and there, anything I'm playing around with. I have a couple resources on there. I have a ebook. It's a nutrition, or it's a recipe ebook for kids that I came up with our integrative pediatrician, and we're in our city here in Dallas. And so that's totally free if you want to check that out. I also have, for people who are looking for something that's faith-based, I do have a book of faith-based meditations ebook that's totally free, that just takes some scripture that I think address mental health topics and helps you kind of look at it in a different way, and breathing, different ways of breathing that are helpful. So that I have that on there. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I'm on Instagram. It's Sparking Wholeness. I do most of my stuff on Instagram. That's where I'm, on Facebook. I try to keep it family friendly on Facebook, because I know not everybody wants to think about mental health. I mean, right now I will say I'm going pretty hardcore on some things, because we aren't addressing the mental health topics like we need to be. And it's a big concern. It's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. My voice is going to get louder. The worst thing, my voice gets louder. So that, and I also have a Facebook page, Sparking Wholeness Integrative Nutrition. And yeah, I mean, that's all. I would love to, reach out if you have a question. I love talking to people. I love connecting. I'm an open book, clearly. I feel like I'm going to watch this back and go, oh, dang, I forgot to mention that, or I forgot to mention that. But
we packed this hour with a lot of information. You have a lot of people commenting, saying thank you. It's right on point. And I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate getting to know you better and having the opportunity to work with you in the past and hopefully in the future. And Erin, thank you for being so brave to share your story and, utilize your testimony to help out others. We really appreciate you.
It's such an honor being on. So thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime. You're always welcome back. And I'm sure we'll have you back next time in December. Write that down. Okay.
All
right, guys. Up next, Dr. DeLeon. She's going to talk to us exactly what you were talking about, Erin. Stress, hormones, and health. So stay tuned. This is going to continue this topic. See ya. Thanks so much.
Thank you.